Hey there, I'm Elise and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be covering a topic that a lot of you have requested, and that's the interview process in Korean companies. So whether you're a recent graduate or you're looking for a career change, understanding the interview process here is going to be crucial to your success. So let's get real. But before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Instagram for more advice, stories, and peeks into my real life in Korea. And if you're still looking for more personalized help after watching this video, feel free to reach out for a one-on-one session with me. First, let's get some basics out of the way. So when you've applied for the job, like sent in your initial application, the number of interview rounds was probably listed there already. They usually have a description of the entire process that you can expect. There can be anywhere from 2 to 7 rounds for the interview. It really just depends on the scale of the company and the experience level required for the position. So in some cases, not all, once you've turned in your application and passed what's called the document round, you might be asked to do a test assessment. This might be a logic test, a skill test, or even a personality test. And Korea takes personality tests very strongly. Like MBTI here is bigger than anywhere else I've ever seen. I have memorized my MBTI because people will not stop asking me. There are even textbooks for how to study for the personality test. I had to get one of these textbooks and it was so hard for me to do this. I'm answering my real answers, but you only have like 5 seconds to answer the question. So I had to study so that I would recognize the question. Okay, so once you pass whatever test that you have to take for this particular company, the hiring manager will usually reach out and explain what will happen on the day of the interview. So they'll already have told you the time and the location. In most cases, you don't get to choose. It's already decided. Or maybe they have a couple of options and you can choose between a couple of options, but it's not going to be really based on your schedule. So you may have to take off work if you're already working. You may have to take off school if you're going to school. Just be prepared. They usually also mention the dress code, but if they don't, I would just recommend leaning toward business or business casual. You can always ask the hiring manager to be sure, but I just always lean toward being more professional rather than more casual. If they do mention the dress code, make sure that you follow it. Like, now is not the time to be an individual. Now is not the time to decide that you're gonna go over the top from what they said. If they said casual, dress casual. I have been in a group interview where one of the members of the group decided that they were gonna wear a suit even though the instructions said to wear casual clothes. And then the interviewer ended up asking her like, oh, were you unable to read the instructions in the email? And that was embarrassing for her, so don't be like her. Once you get to the interview location, it's kind of going to be a wild card how it goes after that. Sometimes they'll have signs that point you in the direction you need to go, like for where you need to wait until it's your time to do the interview. Other times, the hiring manager might have told you to call them when you arrive so they can guide you to where you need to wait for the interview. And in my experience, in some cases, neither of those things happen. And so you just kind of like awkwardly get into the office and talk to whoever you see first, asking who you should talk to. And I would say in those cases, the hiring manager might not be that good because they didn't think through the entire process. But anyway, don't just not do anything. Be proactive if they haven't given you a lot of instructions. If you're concerned before you get to the interview about where you need to go and the hiring manager didn't give you a lot of instructions, this is another thing that you can just ask in advance. But I haven't really been that worried about it that I decided to ask. I just showed up. Maybe don't be like me. So something that also may or may not be mentioned about the interview before you get there is how many other interviewees you'll be doing the interview with. In Korea, group interviews are quite common, especially for entry-level positions. With so many applicants, especially for the bigger companies, they don't really have time to interview everyone individually, so this is why they lean toward group interviews. In my opinion, you don't really need to be worried about sitting next to your competition. I feel like everyone's answers should fit their unique experience, and so you don't really have to try to outdo their answers as much as you need to focus on shining on your own. But you definitely need to be listening to their answers. And this is because some of the interviewers try to catch you off guard and try to basically catch people who are practicing their own answers in their mind. They want to give everyone a fair chance. And so the very first person obviously doesn't have a fair chance if the third person, for example, was practicing their answer in their mind all the time. So the interviewer might suddenly be like, hey, number 3, what did you think of what number 1 just said? And if you weren't listening to what number 1 was saying, then that's going to suck for you. So always be listening to their answers, but don't be trying to calculate how can I give a better answer than them. That's not really the point. So as far as the actual cultural aspect of the interviews, I would say that it's not very ceremonial. So if you enter the room and interviewers were already there, you just need to say hello, bow, and sit in your seat. And then the interviewers will conduct the interview from that point on. If you were in the room first and the interviewers come in after, just stand up, say hello, bow, sit back in your seat, and again, they will conduct the interview from that point on. You don't really need to be thinking about like if you show your back to them or like how far down you bowed. I'm sure there is a degree that you should follow, but I'm saying like don't stress about it. Finally, what might catch you off guard is how easily some interviewers will ask you like blatantly or borderline inappropriate questions. So one question that's very common is, what do your parents do? And I've actually never had this question asked in an interview. I think maybe in 2024, a lot of the interviewers have realized that this is a silly question. It's also considered nowadays discriminatory to judge an applicant based on their parents or their family background. But if the interviewer is older or if they're just old-fashioned, they might still ask you this question. Questions I have gotten that I think were not appropriate to ask me in an interview are, what is the best pizza place in Seoul? When I'm not interviewing for a food company, I'm not interviewing for anything that has to do with pizza whatsoever. They're just asking me a random question. And at the time, it didn't feel like an endearing question. Like in the US during interviews, sometimes you get kind of off topic and ask like random questions or end up on a random subject. It was not like that. This was like really my interview question and I was being judged based on this, and I feel like that was totally like out of line. So another question I got is, why are you even applying for this job? Why don't you go back to America? If you were in America, you'd be getting a much better salary than anything our company would be able to pay you. And I really felt like this was kind of like a passive aggressive question. Like it wasn't a question to try to gauge if I'm a flight risk. Like if there's a risk I'm gonna go back to my country while working here and they lose me as an employee. It was so judgmental, like I was making the wrong life choice. Another question I recall is like, are you applying for this job just because you need a visa? And it's like, again, why are you judging my life choices? But also like I've already given my answer for like why I want to work here, so this is like, oh, do you not believe me? Honestly, this could go on forever. I have a lot more questions that I've been asked that I think should not have been asked. I've seen and heard of so many other people having a similar experience. And the thing to note is that this is not only happening to foreigners. They're also asking Koreans very strange and inappropriate questions in some cases. So it's just something to be prepared for, that you might be getting questions that maybe you shouldn't get. So you need to decide, are you going to answer the question or are you going to dodge the question? Are you going to straight out tell them that they shouldn't have asked you that question? I know there's people that do that as well. My personal choice is to just go ahead and answer the question politely. I feel like there's no need for me to make it into like an awkward situation. So I just give my true answer. But at that point, I probably already decided that I don't want to work for this company. Like if they're going to treat me that way in the interview, imagine how they're going to treat me as an employee. So I just like maybe give it a day, and then I emailed the hiring manager and tell them like, thank you for your time. Thank you for picking me for an interview, but I think that this is not a good fit for me after doing the interview. And so I'm going to withdraw my application. I always say that the interview process is a two-way street. You're trying to impress them, but they're also trying to impress you. They need you to work there. So I don't think that you should take any kind of treatment from them that is not like respectful or polite. You don't need to do that. But how you handle it is up to you. All right, so when it comes to the nuance of doing a job interview in Korea, that's really all you need to know. There are definitely some curveballs like group interviews and random questions that might be inappropriate, but in general, you can treat it like a standard interview back home. If you are looking for specific questions and recommendations for how you should answer those interview questions, be sure to subscribe and follow me on Instagram so that you don't miss out on my next videos. I'll be covering that soon. And again, if you'd like more personal help with any aspects like your resume, an employment plan, or even practicing interview questions, feel free to reach out to me and book a one-on-one session. I'm sure that after our session, you'll be well on your way to your real life in Korea. As always, thanks for watching. Bye! 다음에 봐요.